We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
What happens when we stop chasing titles or chasing our tails in some exhausting burnout spiral and start asking, who am I here to serve and how can I deepen and grow my leadership? Hey, it's Boys and welcome back. Today I'm joined once again by Dr. Max Klau, a man whose life work has been about reimagining leadership, not as power over or separate from, but as integrally driven and in service to. Max is a husband, a father, a musician. He's a new warrior brother, and he's the author of a new book, Developing Servant Leadership at Scale, How to Do It and Why It Matters. Max and I are diving into what it means to lead from a place of courageous wholeness, how deep inner work and confronting our shadows are not side quests, but core practices for creating real lasting impact in the world. Max is drawing on decades in the trenches at City Year, at the New Politics Leadership Academy, and now through his new initiative, the Center for Courageous Wholeness, to show how organizations and individuals alike can grow servant leaders who are not just effective, but aligned, whole, and rooted in purpose. This is not a typical leadership talk. It's a call to align our inner selves with the work we do in the world. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Boys, and welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the podcast where we set out to prove week on week that there is more than one way to be a man. And I think we're doing an extraordinarily fine job of it. I was just looking over the million podcast statistics. We're now on 4 of their top lists.
Really?
For men's mental health, for leadership, for masculinity. And there's one other. We're in like 4 top 100 lists.
Congratulations.
On the podcast. Yes. So here we are. I'm back with Max Klau. Say hello, Max.
Hello, Boyce, and thanks so much for having me back. Great to see you.
I'm totally psyched. So this is Max's second trip back on the podcast. Last time we had a deep conversation about his first book and about the work that he was doing in politics with New Politics Leadership Academy, where he is still a senior advisor. He's the former chief program officer there. Today, we are going to be talking about his new book, Developing Servant Leadership at Scale, How to Do It and Why It Matters. I am one of a number of folks. I'm like the tiny little name who got the opportunity to read the book and do a comment for you
Give
about
me an endorsement. Thank you very much.
The endorsement.
Mm-hmm.
But then I looked at the list of endorsements that are on the website for the book, and it's absolutely amazing. Amazing.
It's exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's, 20 years of work. It's really
20 years of work.
Yes.
Let me tell you a little bit about Max. Dr. Max Klau is an integral master coach, author, speaker, and consultant based in Boston, Massachusetts. He's an alum of 4 different service programs. He led service trips in Israel, Ghana, Honduras, and Ukraine. He received his doctorate from the Harvard Graduate School of Education in 2005 with a focus on leadership development and social change. He is the founder of the Center for Courageous Wholeness, an organization that exists to support purpose-driven people in organizations to achieve greater wholeness by courageously integrating shadow, serving others, and scaling up their impact. That is an incredible mission statement. He is the former chief program officer at the New Politics Leadership Academy, nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to recruiting and developing military veterans and alumni of national service programs to seek political office. Previously, before that, he was vice president of leadership development at the AmeriCorps program City Year. During his decade at City Year, he worked with thousands of idealistic young people, dedicating a year of their lives to supporting students at high-need schools across the nation. His first book was called Race and Social Change, A Quest, a Study, a Call to Action, published in 2017. His second book, coming out in August, is Developing Servant Leadership at Scale, How to Do It, and Why It Matters. He's a husband. He's a new warrior guy. He's a father of two. He's an artist, a musician. He's a community activist. His greatest passion is helping those who seek to serve others to connect with their deeper, higher selves. You're a cool ass dude.
Well, Max, thanks for having me. That sounds nice when you say it like that.
It's okay. Servant leadership. Let's go back to the top. What is servant leadership and why is it so central to what you do?
Yeah. So first, servant leadership is an ancient idea. There's nothing new about this. And, from Jesus caring about the least among us to Moses, caring for the oppressed slave to Buddha's compassion for the sick and dying, every wisdom tradition around the world has said, like, the true purpose of life is to live in service to others, and in particular to the most marginalized among us. But servant leadership also has kind of a modern life as a modern field of study, and it was really kind of the godfather of the modern study of servant leadership is Robert Greenleaf, who wrote his book on servant leadership in the 70s. And it was really grounded in this idea of the true test of leadership is whether those who are led learn and grow as human beings. Like, are you in this to serve others and not out of a hunger for your own, for needs for power or control or domination or, and I think what's really powerful is the context that Greenleaf was working in it was the 70s, it was Watergate. The college campuses were aflame with all kinds of activism. Distrust in government was at epic lows. I mean, now I think if only we could get to the levels of trust that we knew back then.
The lows that we had back then, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it was a real time of turmoil that in a lot of ways mirrored our own. And he realized, we can either fall into despair or we can realize there is another way of understanding leadership. And it's leadership that is, not about exploiting and extracting and abusing power. It's leadership that is there to lift up and be of service to others. And, it's even more timely now than it was in the 70s, I think.
Thank you. Yes, even more timely now. And you have worked in cauldrons for developing leaders.
Yeah.
For decades now. Like, this is the heart of your work, the heart. What was it, or when was it beyond grad school that you started to formulate your ideas about, oh my God, we can actually do this at scale if we start diving into these pieces?
Well, part of it was I was just the only thing I knew I wanted to do when I grew up was serve. I, grew up in a middle-class suburb in Connecticut, and I literally had no idea what career I wanted. I just knew after I graduated from undergrad, I just want to give back. I want to serve some way. So I did a service program that just for me felt like spiritual home, just true joy doing that. And then I spent a couple of years really lost, not knowing what to do, and kept going back to service programs. And just service programs were this place where I just kind of felt my soul was refilled and renewed, and then I got a doctorate in leadership. And to my amazement, I just didn't know about AmeriCorps. I didn't know about City Year. There was this whole world of national service that I just kind of got very lucky and had an informational interview and ended up working there and was like, this is my movement. These are my people. It's certainly not anything I invented. It's just this whole national service movement that's been around for a while. And there's a lot of people who they feel like I need to serve for, as a young adult, like this is what I want to do before I go into grad school or before I go into my career. And so I just think that it's a precious national resource. These people who are like, I'm going to basically, donate my salary, my time to the country. I'm going to get much less than I would out on the market because I think it's important to spend a year serving the country before I go off and focus on, kind of my own career, So anyway, I felt very grateful to connect with that movement, to be a part of that community where I feel so at home with those folks, and also learned a lot about, even with these folks who are already oriented towards serving others, who already are willing to make that kind of commitment, how easy it is to just burn them out, keep them
Yeah.
so focused on technical skills or, or busy work that they miss the deepest dimensions of development. And so a lot of my work was just, how do we build an organizational capacity to invite people into the deeper dimensions of change, which, to be honest, the New Warrior Training Adventure was a huge kind of turning point for me to understand how to work at that level. But that's what the book is about, is a years-long effort to try and bring that to an organization in a scalable way.
Thank you. You've talked some about the New Warrior Training Adventure and how it kind of helped boost you. And I think that that's really cool. And was there a key like aha that came out of that you pulled into your work? I kind of know the answer to this question a little bit already,
Yeah.
but bring it out.
I did carpet work that was like deep stuff for me. And, as for many people, it's like I faced stuff that I had not realized was so powerful in me, and it was scary as hell to do it. And, that's kind of what the work is about. So there was the experiential piece of actually turning to face stuff that was really limiting me and kind of keeping me back. But then there was the whole Joseph Campbell rite of passage framework of just, this is how I understand it. This is why we've designed it this way. And there's this ancient history of designing these kind of initiation experiences. I just had not encountered that. And it just blew the doors wide open of what it means to try and create transformational experiences for people.
Yeah. And so now in writing about servant leadership and in developing servant leaders at scale, and having read your book and having participated in some of your programs, why do you think it is that we as a society, and even in these places where we are putting ourselves of service, that it's so difficult, we get so hooked into the tasks of mission that we
Right.
lose the purpose for what we're doing?
Yeah.
So dive into development. How do we develop? How do we bring these things together?
I think part of it is, especially in the service world, there is such an urgency of serving others and a desire to be as helpful as we can that keeps us working really hard, and it can take up all of our time because there's so much work to be done. I also do think there's kind of an unexamined belief in the service world that is never explicitly stated, but if you turn away from those you serve, you are abandoning the work of service. And it's a kind of a cultural value that has made it tricky to bring inner development into the service world, because people are like, if I'm not thinking about the kids I'm serving and I'm focusing on myself, I'm kind of doing something wrong, because we're here to be of service to others. Not, when you scratch the surface and invite a deeper conversation, people, realize that's not the most helpful way to think about it. But I do think it's kind of it's a deep unexamined value that has been part of the challenge of doing this work. And then I just think there's a whole, we are not skilled and experienced with deep spiritual work, especially in kind of a secular context. So we're very good at, here's the technical skills you need. If you need to, here's the best practice on how to tutor a kid in math or English, a lot of energy around that. But this deeper question of, what does it mean to confront our way of being and to cultivate wholeness in our way of being? You're starting to talk in ways that people are like, what the hell are you talking about? Never mind, let's do it effectively with thousands of people. It's just, what just happened? But I really think we've hit the limits of our ability to respond to these problems without doing that work. We just have to start doing it, because avoiding it is clearly not working for us.
So speak to some of the lived experience, because you kind of had some of these experiences, recognize, inner work, this deep inner work, it makes a difference. So you started bringing models and frameworks into the organizations that you were working with, into the people that you were helping to nurture as servant leaders. Talk about some of the lessons learned, because
Yeah,
even in spaces where we're totally dedicated, it's like, yeah, whatever, I'm not going to do that stuff.
Right. The idea of service is central to these organizations. Not like you have to convince anybody, at City or New Politics to serve, but this inner work. The first 2 chapters of my new book kind of tell the story of,
Yeah.
both because of experiences like the New Warrior Training Adventure, and because of the approaches to leadership I studied, just fundamentally believe you cannot develop as leaders without doing that kind of inner work. You're just like, if you are serious about transformation, it has to somehow get there. And then I step into City Year, which at the time had 15 sites and maybe 1,500 core members. And so it was like, how do you do that at that kind of scale? And my answer was, I have no idea. I have no idea how to do this. And I couldn't find any other organization that was doing it. So I just began experimenting. And, the first challenge was everybody saying, we're just too busy. We don't have time for that. And quickly we found that wasn't true. We could open up some time, an hour every other week. And then we learned everybody hated it. Because, if you just say, here's some time to discuss, people go to venting and complaining and people are like, this is destroying my idealism. This is horrible. So you can't just open up spaces. So then it's like, how do you structure spaces that are effective? And how do you give people that framing of like, we're inviting you to open yourself to the deepest dimension of transformation. You are on this journey of personal transformation. And that's where Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey comes in. And, I talk in the book, I went Campbell crazy after the NWTA and was trying to get core members to think, are you in the belly of the whale? Are you crossing the first threshold? Are you questioning the call? Just went crazy. And they were like, you have to leave us alone. This is just too much. So figured out how to calibrate it and what's the right, here's just the basic, you depart what's familiar and comfortable, you face the road of trials where you get really tested and you get gifts from those going through those things, and you find a way to come back and return and serve others with your gifts. And that simple, powerful framing was really, just from a pedagogical perspective, invited people into the type of work we were doing, so there was a lot of that. I mean, I could go on for a long time, but it gives you a sense of kind of the experience of trying to figure out a way to make this work for a lot of people.
And how you were able to iterate and iterate and iterate to get to something that could actually
and deep appreciation to City Year that let me keep trying, even when it wasn't really working so well for a while.
Social experiments are cool, right?
Yep.
And there was something that you said that kind of triggered, it's easy to go into, and I certainly see this happen in the Mankind Project too, and I see this happen in other kind of personal development organizations, that if the space is set up with kind of weak intentionality, if it's not held in the right way, we can go from powerful personal development to trauma bonding. Which is unhelpful to the individuals or to the mission or to what we're trying to accomplish out there.
Yeah. And, the temptation is, well, then if we just give them a PowerPoint or a reading, or if we just give them the answers, we avoid that, but I was really committed to, we need to find a way so that people show up with their own questions in this space. But, how do you help people find their own questions is very different from here's the latest article from Harvard Business Review on good leadership. It's a very different, really being oriented. I'm going to lead as a host, not as a hero. We're really going to hold the space and invite people to fill the space in ways that are productive and helpful.
So without going too far into, I want people to go buy the book and read the book.
Yeah.
But give some of the frameworks for okay, here are the things that you as a leader need to be considering in building servant leadership. Here are some of the, do this one first.
So what I arrived at and what I talk about in the book was arriving at this model that in the end it was called the flame.
Yes.
And it looks like a torch, it's a visual image. And in the book, I talk about all the different ways of getting at this. And there's something about this visual image that really landed. And, it's a torch. And if you can imagine a torch with 3 nested flames coming out of it. So the handle of the torch is organizational culture and values. And the idea is when you're in an organization, you're developed by the organizational context. And then the outer flame is the do, which is the action we take in the world. And then nested inside that is the know. And that's about knowledge and education and competencies. And then inside both of those is the be. And that's the innermost level of how are we being. And so it's 4 dimensions, and in some ways it's kind of comically simple, but it also really illuminates what's the relationship between our inner way of being and our impact in the world, and helping people see that interconnected was actually really powerful from a kind of pedagogical perspective of, when we used to talk about be, no, do as just kind of a table with 3 columns. And people are like, yeah, I guess B is nice, but if I'm learning what I need to know and doing what I need to do, those 2 things are important enough and I'm too busy for the B. But when you could say this is actually your innermost self and you can see how what you know and what you do flows from that, people started to be like, whoa, okay, this is maybe worth my time, instead of saying this is not important enough for me, they started to say, this is really hard for me. I'm not used to doing this. And that was a huge shift in this work,
Say that again when they started to realize, or when they started to say.
Yeah. A big thing with inner work is people just being like, there's too much urgent stuff to do. Maybe it's nice. I just don't have time for that crap, and we tried presenting this in different ways, but when we showed them this flame, which was visually illuminating how the innermost be relates to what we know and what we do, then people stopped dismissing its importance. And they just started to say, this is hard. Like, I'm not used to thinking about this. I don't usually do this, and then you of course find that there are people in every group who have been thinking about this a lot. And, suddenly you have the introverts have this space to share the wisdom that they have, that extroverts who so often get so much attention and, credit, suddenly they're like, whoa, this person has a lot of kind of inner wisdom that is suddenly has a space to emerge for us, Anyway, does that answer your question, Boyson?
Totally. Yeah. That's exactly it. It goes from being, I don't have time to do that, I don't want to do that, this is stupid, to, oh, this is hard.
Yeah.
And meaningful and powerful.
Yeah. And wow, I've gone years without really thinking much about the B level of the flame. Maybe that's not okay.
What's up, everyone? Now, here on the Mankind Podcast, I talk a lot about building physical health, emotional resilience, but lately, I've been thinking more about mental wealth. Those daily deposits that keep my mind clear, calm, and creative. And honestly, one of the easiest shifts I've made has been adding Magic Mind into my mornings. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot that helps me kick off the day with intention, without the spike, and without the crash. It's packed with clean, natural nootropics and adaptogens like lion's mane and ashwagandha, the stuff that's been backed by science and used for centuries. Now, what I've noticed first was focus, but what kept me coming back was how even my energy has felt all day. So if you want to get your hands on this stuff and give it a shot, head to magicmind.com and use the code MANKINDMAY. That's MANKINDMAY for 20% off your first order. Links will be in the show notes. You got to get your hands on this stuff. You will not regret it.
Talk a little bit more just in the model about that connection to the kind of core values and mission of the organization, because all of that is seated within the handle of the torch.
Right.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, part of it is City Year. If people don't know City Year, it's an AmeriCorps program, young adults in red jackets. It's got this very unique, very powerful culture. And people talk about it all the time. It's a little bit military, it's a little bit summer camp, but the organization was really clear that the way the culture was designed was intended to support idealism and to develop people to be kind of ready to work, ready to serve, ready to collaborate effectively. There were all these cultural pieces. I'd never seen anything like it. And it was so powerful. And it was really clear to me that, high performing organizations, and this is something Jim Collin talks about in Good to Great, high performing organizations have really powerful cultures. And so the model needed to recognize that part of developing people in powerful ways is having a really intentional culture that is grounded in core values and that actually has integrity with those core values. The famous example is Enron, which had its core values on the wall of integrity and, honesty, and it was all BS. But the high performing organizations, they have core values and people live them every day and feel them, so it was really important that the model helped people understand that that's part of the work of leadership development.
And I love the idea. It holds the flame, right? That's the distinction between something that's held, contained, and a conflagration.
And actually, it's this challenge hidden so deep in leadership development that I realize people don't ever talk about it. But people don't really think about what is the relationship between organizational purpose and individual purpose. And I have worked with like a $1 billion professional services firm that said it was like branding itself as being purpose driven. And what they did was they came up with a really clear organizational purpose and then basically tried to download that purpose into everybody in the organization. And this idea that everybody in the organization had their own purpose, and what you're hoping for was really deep alignment between that individual purpose and the organizational purpose. They had never asked people to craft their own purpose. They were always asking, like, what do you like about our purpose? What are you going to work on around our purpose? And just, it's a real blind spot of organizations that get serious about this, but then assume anybody who shows up is just kind of a blank slate, and we can download our purpose into them. And it actually keeps people disconnected from their own purpose, and actually makes people who might not have aligned purposes stick around longer because they aren't as conscious as they could be that this place, it really isn't the right fit for me.
I think that we're going to start to move toward your new organization, but something in Center for Courageous Wholeness, something in this question popped into an equity and culture, cross-cultural conversation too, with we're going to download the purpose of the organization into you, loses a lot.
Yeah.
When we're thinking about a multicultural context, a pluralist context, a context with a whole lot of diversity and difference. So talk about that, because I know that's also really at play in your thinking and your development.
Yeah. Well, what comes up, and I realize you asked me about how you develop servant leaders, and I have to bring this as a response to that is the whole idea of shadow, which is integral to this idea of courageous wholeness. Wholeness means we are taking the brave act of turning to face the parts of ourselves that we don't like. And, what I've learned is a lot of people, if you ask them their mission, it's always some noble, beautiful thing. And the shadow, and again, this I learned from the Mankind Project, the idea of our shadow is, how are we being if we're not aligned with our mission? And that's just kind of bleak and not pleasant, and it's ugly to look at. It's just so uncomfortable to look at. But I think, a lot of people, when they do their mission in their shadow, they realize, I've been living in my shadow for a long time. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are not servant leaders, because they have just kind of settled into this kind of easy, comfortable place where they are not living their mission. And it may be comfortable, but it is not a place of integrity for them. And holding a space for people to get clear on that and then start to work towards integrity is a key piece of developing servant leaders.
What's at risk? There's another Mankind Project term right there. What's at risk when organizations, especially those who are seeking to serve out there in the world and benefit, what's at risk when the individuals, the leaders, the folks in that organization don't do or aren't doing their shadow work, aren't willing to look at?
So much, a lot. If you don't honor shadow and recognize that we have to turn and face it, then what ends up happening is there's all kinds of judgment and shame around it. And at City Year, which was when I was there, it kind of pivoted to trying to focus on the high school dropout crisis, to trying to get all the core members focused on that, which was really bold and inspiring, but also excuse me, the pressure just ratcheted up, just the intensity. And, without being able to talk about shadow, you kind of go to this place where it's like, if you are ever burnt out or tired or not completely idealistic, you're like a bad idealist. You're like, in ways that really left people feeling kind of shamed and judged and burned out, But once you open up this idea of, listen, we're all humans have shadow. We're going to hold a space for all of us to kind of name this and work with it. People just literally like breathe a sigh of relief, like, oh my God, I can be real, and it just releases all of this shame. And then it just becomes, what's the wisdom of working skillfully with our wholeness so that we show up from our mission and not our shadow. And you invite all this incredible collective wisdom that is out there, and also, Carl Jung says, if we haven't done the work to confront our shadow, we project it out there, and we see in some other all the stuff we don't like, and there's all this dehumanization and polarization, and this is literally a threat to the species right now. This is like tearing apart American politics, global politics, and I have found it's very powerful to invite conversations about shadow in kind of cross-cultural spaces. Suddenly everybody is kind of working with this from an equal place. And I just find it to be a really productive way to build a sense of belonging, connection, and to surface really uncomfortable, hard things in individuals and organizations in productive ways.
What do you think it is about our society and our culture that we are so obsessed with mythological stories, hero stories, big stories out there on the screen, what we watch at night on TV, but then we go to work and we sit at our desks and we do this thing and we completely isolate ourselves from that.
Right.
Why do we do that?
Well, that's what Joseph Campbell helped me understand. That's why his writings were so big to me. He's like, on the one hand, you can dismiss them as like children's fairy tales. These are just like pointless stories. Or you can treat them as like, actual truth, like literal truth. And both of those things are mistakes. But if we can view them as expressions of the energies within each of us, and this story we're constantly telling of the good guy and the bad guy, the hero and the villain, is about the energies inside each of us, our kind of higher values about serving others, and then the parts of ourselves we don't like to admit, which is that we care about ourselves and want to control and dominate. Like, that is the energies inside of ourselves, which is why we keep telling those stories. I just find, like, once you put on the right pair of glasses, the deeper meaning of these stories like suddenly pops into view, but until you learn how to kind of view them from that lens, they're either just trivial pop culture crap, or they're, like literalist stuff that's really causing problems in the world. If we think it is literally, the world is 5,000 years old or whatever, that, reading these stories in the most literal sense.
Yes. So go get the book, read the book on developing servant leaders at scale.
Yes.
How to do it and why it matters. I think that we've touched on some of the how to do it, enough of a tease to get somebody interested.
A little taste.
And I think it's fairly clear when I read the news every day why it matters.
Yeah. It's shadow is everywhere. It's dark times. Yeah.
That we need that. So let's talk a little bit about the Center for Courageous Wholeness, which I just learned about. I think your email was last week.
Yeah, it's pretty new.
So talk more about that, Courageous Wholeness.
Yes. So it's going to be the platform for bringing this work out into the world. And I want to lift up an important mentor of mine. His name is Dr. Angel Acosta, who is the founder of the Acosta Institute. His background, he's got a doctorate in mindfulness and social justice. And I was having a conversation with him, and he really pushed me. He was like, Max, you have 3 ideas in your work. Like, you're like doing shadow stuff, you're doing service stuff, you're doing scale. They're all very different. Like, what is at the center of what you're doing? You know, like, what is really the essence? And he really challenged me. And when the word came to me, I was like, that's it. That's everything. This idea of courageous wholeness. I've led hundreds of sessions of inviting people to confront their shadow. And I'm like, this is what it means to do the work of courageous wholeness. Like, this is scary and hard, but it is the work of becoming whole. And, and then I had one of these experiences where I went and Googled it, and none of the millions of consultants and coaches in the world had claimed that. And the URL was wide open. I was just like, this is something that needs to exist, and it's what I'm going to bring into the world. So I'm very excited about it. Part of it'll be consulting and coaching. Part of it is going to be workshops and retreats. Part of it, my dream is there's certification for people who really want to, get good at this approach to kind of inner development at scale, and fellowships. It's really fun to think about what it could be, but I'm just really clear that that is the work. That is the essence of the work, is courageous wholeness for individuals and organizations.
There's so you're an integral master coach also. And I think that it ties these things together in a really nice way too, because we're looking back into the, from the archetypal and heroic all the way to the kind of modern and mechanistic to the multicultural and pluralistic to the whatever is next. And this kind of wholeness idea kind of brings those together.
It weaves. I mean, I feel like Ken Wilber, his work is about wholeness. How do we take all the theories from the East and the West and the inner and the outer, just such a quest for wholeness. And, it's funny that one of the most influential things from integral coaching is this incredibly simple idea. And I'm kind of amazed. I have a doctorate in human development, and nobody had put it to me, but the whole include and transcend idea, that development is about including and transcending our current kind of level of development. And that, when we grow, we eventually move beyond our current consciousness, but we don't lose it. We don't go to war with it. We don't destroy it. We include and transcend it. And we're suddenly able to see it and work with it more skillfully in ways that we couldn't when we were kind of in it, and we can access it whenever we want it, but we also have the ability to access a broader way of being in the world that makes more things possible. And it's kind of a very simple idea, but I was like, that really is what all development is about. And I just find it to be a central idea for what are we trying to do? If we're trying to transform people, what does that mean?
Yeah. I have taken part in some of your offerings that you put together. My wife,
yes,
also a nonprofit leader, has taken part in some of your offerings. So do you want to talk about some of the stuff that you just put out there as here's a way to get engaged. Here's a way to engage with the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So, over the course of 20 years of figuring out how to develop people, I've come up with multiple different workshops. So there are 4 that are really the essence of my work. And one of them is adaptive leadership. And that's a particular model developed by Ron Heifetz at the Kennedy School. And I just find it to be the most helpful way of understanding what is leadership if you're trying to do this kind of both inner development and solving, working on complex problems. And then the leading with wholeness is this work of light and shadow. How do we work with that? And I bring a lot of mythology and pop culture to help people understand. You were talking about the stories we tell. Can we help people understand what these things are trying to do? Then I work a lot with kind of Newtonian organizations versus living systems. There's some of my favorite literature from the world of leadership is about how, our way of understanding organizations was influenced by Newtonian science. But there's a whole new set of science like complexity and chaos theory that doesn't work all the principles are different. And if we think about leadership from those principles, it's a completely different way of understanding what leadership is, how change happens. And I just feel like, again, we've hit the limits of our ability to respond to the moment without being able to work in both of those paradigms in a skillful way. And then the final piece is question finding. Like, how do you, we talked about if you just open up a space and ask people to reflect, it could be really terrible. So how do you help people find the most powerful questions that are alive for them? And, I've encountered another organization here in Boston called the Right Question Institute that has a really profound model around that. So anyway, I've mixing all those things together in a way that really leaves people feeling both like I have a whole set of tools and a different way of understanding what leadership is.
So give us the website for the Center for Courageous Wholeness.
Great. So it's just www.centerforcourageouswholeness.org. That's what it is. And I will have, I'll have events up there. I'm going to be offering my Leading with Wholeness every month as a workshop for people who want to get a taste of this. I'm just at the beginning of launching this, so there's going to be a lot out there, but check it out at Center for Courageous Wholeness. And I will say there's I'm launching both the book and the center in a free workshop at the Garrison Institute on July 23rd. And that's free to hop into. It'll be me and Dr. Angel Acosta again, July 23rd from 12 to 1:30. And if you just Google Courageous Wholeness, you'll find it.
You'll find it. Is that going to be on person or in?
It'll be
online.
It'll be online.
Yep. That's awesome. That sounds really cool. I will have to sign up for that.
Great.
And go to maxklau.com.
That's my personal website.
Klau. On maxklau.com, you will find links to the book, how it's available for pre-order now.
Yep.
Go take a look there. And what else? What did we miss that needs to be said out into the space?
Just all of this work is grounded in this belief that the world around us is a reflection of the world within us. And if we are polarized and divided and at war in the outside, it's because we are polarized and divided and at war on the inside. And I know folks who have gone through the New Warrior Training Adventure and are doing this kind of work understand the importance of turning to face the hard inner stuff. And this is just an attempt to kind of bring that into the world at a time when it feels like desperately needed.
Thank you very much. And it might start with, we talk about shadow in the Mankind Project as hide, repress, and deny. I can hear all the denial in my own body, right? Like, no way. I'm not that thing that I despise out there. No way.
Yep. It's intense. Yep. But hey, if we recognize we're all doing it, then it takes some of the sting and some of the shame out, and we can access all of the wisdom, because people have been trying to work with this for years and actually have some insights about how to do it well.
Max Klau, thank you for hanging out with me for a little while. I'm grateful to be your friend.
Back at you, Boyson. Really fun. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.
Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind Podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.